A King and a Court of Fools by H. Ryan. Written by Larry Enright and read by Larry Enright. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. Making Tracks. St. Catherine's School had a new building and an old building. The new building had opened only 5 years ago. It had fancy crank-operated tilt-in windows that still worked, fluorescent lighting, and shiny black and white tile floors. But its exterior concrete walls were stained a permanent gray by the smoke of cars and trucks and the sulfur-laden haze from the steel mills to the north along the Monongahela River. Steel and its related industries were the lifeblood of Pittsburgh and the boroughs and townships surrounding it in the 1950s, and fueled the post-war construction boom in the United States. The old school building was an ancient 3-story red brick structure. It had huge rippled glass windows that afforded natural light a full run of every room. The highly polished floors were of wide oak boards that had been waxed and re-waxed 1,000 times. And the classrooms had high decorative plastered ceilings that lacked only a Michelangelo to properly adorn them. Despite this, Mrs. Baxter said that the old building was held together only by the prayers of the faithful and the grace of God. The old building was where the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms were. Everyone else was in the new building. Few students or teachers had any reason to go from one building to the other, but the two were connected on the 3rd floor by an enclosed walkway that creaked so loudly most of the students were afraid to go that way. Tom and the other 6th grade Caswells crossed it every day after school, because it was a shortcut to get to our regular meeting place in the parking lot behind the new building. "We have to get home double time. Where's Big Bob?" Tom didn't like the initials someone had scratched in a creosote-covered post beside the streetcar tracks, and was obliterating them with a quarter. The tracks ran all the way from downtown Pittsburgh, over a bridge, through a tunnel, and along Route 88 into the South Hills, ending at a town called Library that none of us had ever been to. There was a stop at St. Catherine's. There was also a stop at the end of Caswell Drive. "He took the long way, the big chicken," Braithwaite said. Braithwaite and Bobby Fay were engaged in a one-handed wrestling match. That's where you stood foot to foot and were locked hand to hand. The object was to get the other kid's foot to move. You were only supposed to use your hand and arm to pull and push, and to make your opponent lose his balance. But it was hard not to cheat, especially if you were up against Big Bob. Bobby Fay tried as hard as he could to hold back Braithwaite's push, but he was slowly giving ground. "He's no chicken. He got stuck helping Sister Patrice Marie. I saw him cleaning erasers." "You're going to lose, Fay. Surrender now or face defeat." It wasn't looking too good for Bobby. Braithwaite was pushing as hard as he could. Bobby's hand had been forced back almost even with his body. But then his arm went suddenly limp. Braithwaite couldn't stop himself. He tipped too far forward, and Bobby yanked him the rest of the way down. He laughed. "I think defeat are not where dare's supposed to be, Braithwaite. You lose." "You cheated." "Brains over brawn." "How about I brain you?" "You'd have to catch me first." Tom raised his hand, and they stopped. "Mary, what time is it?" 2:40. "We can't wait any longer." "We always wait until quarter of." Of things relating to time and money, Mary was never wrong. Tom didn't care. "You'll just have to catch up later. Let's go. We've got 10 minutes till the next streetcar comes." Tom grabbed my hand, and we started off toward the streetcar tracks. "You're taking the tracks?" Kate asked. We never walked down the tracks going home from school. It was the quickest way, but not the safest. If the nuns saw you, you were guaranteed a lecture, stiff punishment, and a phone call home, which of course meant another lecture and worse punishment once you got there. And if a streetcar came by while you were on the tracks, it was big trouble. But Tom knew the schedule. He kept a copy in his book bag. "Don't sweat it, we'll be fine." Tom stepped up onto the rail and took off. We all followed him on the rail single file, except for me. My balance wasn't very good, so I ran beside him, jumping from railroad tie to railroad tie. Tom made it a game. If you fell off, you went to the end. No pushing was allowed. And of course, it was perfectly legal, according to the Book of Tom, to stop suddenly or throw your arm out to your side, or whistle, or yell, or do anything you could to distract your opponents. You just couldn't touch them, and they couldn't touch you. Whoever was first in line at the end was the winner. Fairly simple. The school quickly fell out of sight around the bend behind us, and by the time we passed the hasty road stop, everyone but Tom and Sam had fallen off at least once. That put Tom in first place and Sam right behind him. At some points along the line, there were two sets of tracks, one for streetcars going toward the city, and one for cars going the other way. At other points, there was only one set of tracks, and they shared the same line. Red and green signal lights at both ends of these single sections of track told the operators when to wait and when to go. Dad had told us that they made it that way to accommodate the narrower roadbed at certain points because of the terrain around it. Tom said it was because they messed up and ran out of track. We'd just passed Connor Road and a red signal light, and were on a single section of track, in the home stretch to Caswell, when we heard it. The familiar sound of a streetcar horn from up ahead. A chain-link fence ran along both sides of the tracks for about 50 yards, ending where the gravel roadbed dropped off sharply into a swollen creek on the right and the guardrail on Route 88 on the left. We were trapped. Tom looked back at us. "He's not supposed to be here. He's way ahead of schedule." "We should go back," Kate said. We were all getting a little tired. "It's too far. Let's make a run for it." From their canary yellow top to their fire engine red sides, streetcars were marvels of engineering. They were designed as efficient one-car trains that ran on rails and were powered by electricity. There was no smoke, no smelly fumes, and no loud engine noise. They had oversized windows for ventilation in summer and electric heaters for warmth in the winter. There were double doors at the front and middle to let passengers on and off. A single headlight on the front to light the track at night, and a silver cowcatcher to keep the tracks clear of big rocks and little kids. The clickety-clack of the oncoming streetcar shook the rails under our feet. Tom jumped off into the gravel and ran. We ran too. The car's metal undercarriage struggled against the curve in the track ahead, and its metal wheels squealed in protest as it rounded the bend and came into view. The operator saw us. He flashed the headlight, rang the bell twice, and the streetcar began to slow down. That gave us enough time to make it to the end of the fence and slip around it to the safety of the other side. As he passed by, the operator shook his head at us and frowned. Wayne was almost crying. "That was stupid, Tom. That was really stupid." "You're stupid, Wayne. Jesus." Tom didn't like crybabies, and he didn't like it when someone called him stupid. "I'm not the one who almost got us killed." "Give me a break. It wasn't even close. Come on, we've got to get going." We ran full out till we got to the Caswell stop. The regularly scheduled car came by just as we were walking up the street toward our house. Tom pointed to it. "See, Wayne, I told you. There's the Library 44. The other one wasn't even supposed to be there." "I don't care. I'm going home." "See you at the cherry tree." Wayne didn't answer. He just took off. And as we passed Bobby Fay's and Braithwaite's houses, they left too. No one said anything, not another word, until we were almost home. I wiggled free of Tom's hand. He was all sweaty. "Tommy, why did you take the Lord's name in vain?" He turned on me and pushed me hard. I fell down, and he started yelling. "What do you care? You don't even know what that means." I skinned my elbow on the asphalt when I fell, and the brush burn was turning bright red. It hurt, but I wasn't going to let him know that, and I wasn't going to cry. "You did something bad. That's what it means." "Shut up. Just shut up, okay?" Sam helped me up and brushed me off. "You all right, Harry?" "I'm okay." Kate took my hand, and we started walking up the driveway toward the house. Mary and Sam came too. Tom hung back, kicking the dam we'd built that morning, smashing it until it released the last of its water into the storm drain. "See you at the cherry tree." They pretended like they didn't hear him. As the screen door closed, he looked right at me and said, "Sorry," so only I could hear it. Then he ran off into the woods. We got changed into our play clothes, and Mary fixed my scrape with alcohol and a Band-Aid. Mom had milk and oatmeal raisin cookies waiting for us in the kitchen. "Where's Tom?" she asked. "Wasn't he outside with you?" Sam looked around the table at us. "He's in the woods, Mom." "In his school clothes? Mary, please go tell your brother to come home and change his clothes. We can't afford to buy him another uniform this year." "Yes, ma'am." We put our dishes into the sink and followed Mary outside. She stopped after we'd gone about 10 feet into the woods and said what everybody was already thinking. "Tom was wrong to take us on the tracks, and wrong to take it out on you, Harry." Kate pulled a honeysuckle flower from a late-blooming vine growing alongside the path, pinched the bottom tip off the bloom, and threw the stamen and the sweet nectar into her mouth. "I think he already knows that." "What are we going to do about it?" Sam asked. I was making a mess with my honeysuckle, but it was no good. "Sister Concepta said we should turn the cheek." Kate laughed at me. "You mean the other cheek, you little goofball." I looked down at my blue keds. I'd forgotten to tie one. "He said he was sorry, Katie." They all just stared at me. "Hey!" Tom called to us from the path ahead. He was waving frantically. "Get up here, quick!" We ran after Tom. He was headed for the cherry tree. The brushes and undergrowth along the path were heavy with moisture from the overnight rain, and soaked our arms and legs as we ran by. The strong, sweet scent of fall blackberries filled our nostrils with the longing to stop and graze, but the urgency in Tom's cry prevailed. When we broke out into the open near the big fork, the late afternoon sun sat on the trees to the west and shone right in our eyes. Something was wrong with the woods. Something terribly wrong. Turning at the fork, we stopped dead in our tracks, and there it was. Lightning had struck the cherry tree, and had broken it in half like you would snap a dead twig in your hand. The trunk with the king's limb and most of the branches we used to sit on was lying on the ground in a circle of blackened grass. "What are we going to do?" Sam shook his head sadly. "It'll never grow back." Mary looked at her watch. "We have to get started on the new clubhouse, that's what." Then she remembered. "Mom said to come home and get changed, Tom." He kicked what was left standing of the tree. "Oh, okay. Let's look at the Pink Lady first." "It was a good old tree," Kate sighed. "I'm going to miss it." We had lost our best friend, the one who held us up without ever complaining that we were too heavy, the one who had never let us down because it was too tired, or said it just didn't feel like it anymore. Our best friend. We passed the foxhole, the stand of trees, and the tall grass field. We jumped Dirty Crick without falling in, and followed the trail toward the jagger bushes, and no one said a word. I thought about my hamster, Mickey, who had died a year before. I cried a lot then. All of us had. But somehow, this was so much worse. So bad, I couldn't even cry about it. When we got to the jagger bushes, we found something that none of us expected. The secret cave was all smashed down, and the bushes spread wide apart, and the Pink Lady was gone.